Hello folks, we're now a good way into Legion Remix, so it's time to do my regular patch review and take a look at how Remix is shaping up. I don't think it's unfair to say that Remix got a bit of a bumpy ride during the PTR testing phase, with a lot of negative feedback and dooming. However, the developers did take a lot of that feedback on and made a couple of pretty major swings at addressing player concerns. Looking back at the PTR cycle, player concerns can be roughly summed up under 4 headings: too slow, not strong enough, time gated, and no mage tower. Now I'm going to start off by sharing my own personal experience of Remix to date, then I'll look back through those headings and share my thoughts about how Legion is playing out against those community concerns, and I'll also be comparing the experience against that of Mists of Pandaria Remix. Just as was the case with Mist of Pandaria Remix, I'm personally not super interested in the Mythic Plus and raiding side. Even at the end of an expansion, I really don't find the idea of juggling essentially 2 versions of World of Warcraft super exciting. What I am far more interested in is the collecting side, especially mount collecting. And at the same time, Legion was my first ever World of Warcraft expansion. I actually started WoW just before the final 7.3 patch of Legion came out. Whenever I think about Legion, what I always remember the most is the Suramar storyline, which until the start of the War Within, I had always considered as the crowning glory of in-game storytelling. Perhaps surprisingly, therefore, I'd only ever done that story once on my first main, so the idea of going back and re-experiencing the Legion storyline was certainly very appealing. My main concern about Remix going in was how much effort would be required to farm all of the bronze I needed for all of the mounts, as there was for sure some very significant bronze inflation between MOP Remix and Legion Remix. So I was very relieved to see a last minute pre-release change to significantly increase those bronze drops. Anyways, let's get into the Legion Remix experience. When compared to Mist of Pandaria Remix, Legion Remix has a much more substantial introduction, which takes us through a Dalaran which is under direct attack from the Legion, and sees us very quickly get our first artifact weapon. And that's where things got a little bit weird, as we're then sent out to start the Order Hall campaign and get our first weapon again. This is explained away by the Bronze Dragonflight having taken the original weapon and replaced it with a fake, which we now can obtain to scrap for some additional bronze. I've personally never been a big fan of timey-wimey paradox time travel science fiction, and this was no different. I do understand why the dev team did this. It's to introduce us to the new version of the artifact weapons power tree, but I cannot help but think that it might have been better to wait until we actually did get to the Order Hall and do that first weapon scenario before they did that. That said, once we get past that little bit of annoyance and into Legion proper, following the Order Hall campaign and getting into questing through the leveling zones was a fairly smooth process, and the nostalgia started to strike in earnest. Unlike Mists of Pandaria Remix, where leveling was very much a hashtag no changes deal, for Legion we got some very significant differences to the open world leveling experience, with infinite research, a new system that offered a choice of up to 4 objectives to choose from, along with the occasional bonus special assignment quest, which also drew from the same pool of activities. Those activities included killing NPCs, completing story chapters, doing dungeons and raids, mining and herbing, and even collecting time motes from the air. As well as being a major source of bonus power and bronze, these infinite research quests also offered a way to encourage players to try other activities, for example alerting us to the fact that raids were available even during leveling. But with multiple of these quests being available per day, I personally found the process of having to go back to Dalaran to hand them in and get another a little bit annoying, as it was taking me away from my questing progress. Something that was especially the case if you got an objective that you could not complete just while leveling. As for the leveling experience itself, it was very quick. New levels would pop up every few minutes, and it only took me 2 of the leveling zones to hit max level, which was pretty satisfying. Reaching max level was where another major difference with the MOP Remix formula started to come to the fore. In MOP Remix, the item level of gear drops would be entirely related to one's level. And once we hit max level, we basically stopped getting any gear upgrades, unless of course you wanted to spend bronze on upgrading your existing gear or go off and do the raiding content. And this feeling of not getting any gear upgrades in the open world was further exacerbated by us not getting any ring or trinket drops during questing. In contrast, with the gear upgrade system having been removed in Legion Remix, once we hit max level, the gear drops became based on our current item level, up until I think it was you hit around item level 540, after which we start using a brand new max level drop called Motes of Time, which enabled us to create a steady but slower stream of increasing item level gear. This, along with the weapons talent unlocks, enabled open world players like myself who just wanted to finish the storyline to continue to get gear upgrades, and that was something that I found to be pretty satisfying. Unlike Legion, where we had a different artifact tree per weapon, every class and weapon in Legion Remix gets the same artifact tree with a choice of 5 different paths, and of course an infinite trait at the end, which added primary stats and versatility. While that infinite trait is not truly infinite, having only 999 steps, at least for me as an open world player, it certainly did feel infinite. Early on in leveling, bronze drops compared to the cost of items did feel a bit stingy. I got 2 mounts on my first day, but only 1 the second day. But later on, I did notice that this was subtly speeding up, and in one session I even got 5 mounts. And by the time I completed all of the zone storylines, I'd got enough bronze for every mount that I did not currently have. Now, to compare that process with Mists of Pandaria, after finishing the campaign in MOP, I then had to start a second character in order to complete my collection. Now, I am going to say that I only needed the brand new Remix exclusive mounts, as I already had all of the existing Legion mounts that were also available during Remix. And if you were a player who did want those existing mounts, then this bronze acquisition process would be a very different story, as many of those mounts are super expensive. But overall, I think that the rate of bronze acquisition did feel pretty good. Having completed the full Suramar storyline and dipped into the Nighthold and a few dungeons, I'm pretty much done for now until the next Phase 3 unlocks. And that means it's a good time to start looping back to those 4 worries that the community had before Legion Remix launched. The first 2 community worries, that the experience might be just too slow and we might not end up being strong enough, are fairly related, and in my opinion neither of them has been borne out in practice. Gaining levels felt extremely well paced, as did my player power acquisition for the most part. As always with NPCs level scaling with our characters, you don't really feel that you're getting stronger during the level up process, but I never really felt like my power was lacking either. And once you hit max level, the steady growth of gear in that infinite trait is for sure very noticeable, especially in Suramar when facing off against large packs of elites, or indeed when I was soloing the Archway dungeon. And yes, soloing group content is very much a thing, with even the Mythic Plus and raidings being doable as you gain higher levels of power. No surprise then that now that Legion is live, I have yet to see any serious feedback about slow progress or lack of power coming from the player base. But what about the concerns about the time gating? This was a very major point of contention for the player base, but I suspect that we may just have forgotten how much content Legion has compared to Mists of Pandaria. In its day, Mists of Pandaria had without doubt the most content that any World of Warcraft expansion had ever seen, and second place wasn't even close. And that was a title that Mists of Pandaria did manage to hold until Legion came out. If MOP in its day had been a major jump in content, then Legion was an even bigger one. And this has meant that in reality, I think that most of us haven't really felt the time gating. It turns out that the Emerald Dream in Mythic Plus, along with farming all that power and pushing keys up to plus 100 and above, was more than enough to keep most of us very busy. And even as a much more casual open world type of player, I wasn't even able to finish the Phase 1 content before Phase 2 came out. That said, it only took me half a week into Phase 2 before I eventually hit that time gate. But in all honesty, I'm personally fine with that. I never planned to no life Legion Remix for several months, and having hit most of my bronze goals, all that is really left for me is to look back in a week or two and complete the other storylines. And that's something that means I'm able to go back and start enjoying some other games in the meantime. And finally, I do want to address those Mage Tower complaints. With the Mage Tower now a permanent feature in the modern game, I think that we need to be real here. What players were really asking for, I suspect, was not the gameplay, but instead access to the old Mage Tower appearances. Something that, for better or for worse, the developers were never going to bring back, especially in a format which by its nature would be completely trivialized by that Legion Remix power acquisition. And this reality is probably why those complaints about the Mage Tower not being brought back have now died down, now that Legion Remix is live. With so much else to do, we don't really notice that the Mage Tower isn't there, albeit I do wonder if once Phase 3 opens up the Broken Shore, which is of course where the Mage Tower originally was located, that might serve as a bit of a reminder, especially as that Broken Shore open world content was pretty much the low point of Legion. Stepping back and zooming out, and while Legion Remix is not even halfway through, I do feel that it has done a great job in building upon the already successful Remix format, managing to address head-on the main downside of Mock Remix, which was that gear upgrade system and the lack of meaningful max level progression for open world players. However, while those infinite research quests do have a lot of merit, especially as a tool to widen players' horizons, I do think that they feel a bit over-designed to me, as was the introductory questline. And I personally think that both of those could have been significantly streamlined. For example, maybe infinite research could have given more interesting rewards had it been a once per day thing. But honestly, these are very minor criticisms of what is an overall success. This does though raise a bit of a major question for the World of Warcraft developers, and that is, where does Remix go next? Legion and Mists of Pandaria were the two most obvious choices, and when we look beyond that to the other expansions, it becomes a lot less clear. Wrath of the Lich King has a nostalgia factor, but it is very lacking in content outside of raiding by modern standards. And I do wonder if the WoW dev team would be comfortable with pre-Cataclysm graphical fidelity. And when you look at Warlords of Draenor, likewise it is very lacking in content, and of course it was disliked by many players. Looking to more recent expansions, and Battle for Azeroth has the content to be sure, but it had a very mixed reaction from the player base back in the day, and Shadowlands is, well, the most disliked expansion ever. And after Shadowlands, I personally think that the newer expansions are just too recent to be brought back so soon. Mists and Legion Remix for sure can be brought back again in the future, but I think that the next expansion would be far too soon for that, and this does make me wonder if we will see another remix at all, at least for a period of time. I would not completely rule out the possibility of a Battle for Azeroth remix. Despite its negative reaction overall, it was still quite popular with quite a lot of players, and patch 8.2 is to this very day the best mid-expansion patch in World of Warcraft's history, so the developers could for sure build quite a decent offering out of it. But that negative reputation might at the same time limit player take-up, and that could mean that the developers might end up deciding that their time might be better spent in something newer. I guess that time will tell, but Legion Remix has demonstrated that there is a clear benefit to having something a little different to round up the end of a World of Warcraft expansion, and I do hope that the team are already cooking something up for midnight. And that's it for my Remix review. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on Remix. Are you living your best life in the raids? Or has it all been a big disappointment? Comment down below. If you found my Legion Remix review helpful, entertaining, and even just plain annoying, then do let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos along with my other content, then hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My links in the description below as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.